In 1573, a haggard fighter, made weary by years of war, climbed up the road to the monastery at Koyasan and asked to become a Buddhist priest. During Japan's more turbulent times, many warriors and warmongers entered into the priesthood, but this was usually done for political rather than religious reasons. Forcing a defeated enemy into service of a temple could be an alternative to execution. And like in medieval Europe, it was a way to firmly remove someone from the line of succession. What made this fighter different was that he honestly believed in the vows. He was so devoted to the faith, in fact, that only his Buddhist name, Ogo, has been recorded by history. But as pious as Ogo was, he constantly found that his new way of life was under assault by the old. Ogo wrote very little about his life prior to joining the priesthood at Koyasan. He and his father may have been vassals of the Rokkaku clan of modern-day Shiga Prefecture. Ogo claimed in his writings that he became a Buddhist priest so that he might give his fallen lord proper burial rites, and the Rokkaku clan was defeated by warlord Oda Nobunaga early in his campaign to conquer Japan. Wherever he was from, Ogo traveled to Koyasan at age 26, or age 38. Again, he was vague about his past. There, he acquired the name he is still known by today. Ogo quickly became accustomed to the vegetarian diet of a priest, and then decided to take things even further. The priest abstained not only from meat, but grains as well. That meant no oats, no wheat, and no rice. Essentially what Ogo could eat were all fruits and most vegetables. And probably eggs too, since I don't think veganism was really a concept yet. Ogo cut his teeth, his incredibly underutilized teeth, as a missionary for Koyasan. He tried to convert the unfaithful, and the already faithful he asked for money. He was good at the job, but it also brought him into contact with his past life as a warrior. Koyasan's missionaries were operating in the same territory as Nobunaga's troops, and the soldiers routinely had monks executed under suspicion of espionage. This, coupled with Koyasan's support for Nobunaga's enemies, brought the warlord into direct conflict with Koyasan. War was largely averted with Nobunaga's sudden death in 1582, but 3 years later, Nobunaga's successor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, returned with a much larger army. Hideyoshi demanded that Koyasan disarm and scale back its territory, or he would torch the entire mountain. Koyasan's chief abbot agreed, and he gave Ogo the job of delivering the news to Hideyoshi. This is another hint at Ogo's past. It's suspected that he was an acquaintance of either Hideyoshi or one of his subordinates. Ogo traveled to Hideyoshi's encampment, which was built on top of the smoking ruins of Kokawadera Temple. That is quite a vibe. Hideyoshi certainly received the priests like they were old friends. They discussed swords and the sounds people make when they're stabbed in the throat, and generally got along like a temple on fire. Hideyoshi even agreed to drop the demand for Koyasan to scale back its buildings. The following year, Ogo was invited to a banquet at a less intimidating location, where Hideyoshi made it very clear to all the daimyo in attendance that Ogo was his very good friend, and they should treat him well. Instead of thinking Ogo of Koyasan, Hideyoshi said, you ought to be thinking Ogo is Koyasan. Ogo was now the personal priest of a once agnostic warlord. This put him in a massively powerful position, and he leveraged his influence to renovate several of Koyasan's older buildings and implement public works in the area. The power of the priest's name extended even beyond the mountains of Koyasan. He journeyed all over the country and mobilized bands of peasants to build new and repair old temple buildings, some of which remain popular attractions today. But Olgo's friendship with Hideyoshi began to test the limits of his beliefs. The warlord held a memorial service for his mother at Koyasan, replete with pipers and drummers. This went against a strict ban on musical instruments within the monastery. Allegedly, as soon as the musicians started playing, the clear skies clouded over and a thunderstorm rained out the festivities. Elsewhere, Hideyoshi would dispatch Olgo to forge peace treaties with his enemies. Less war is undoubtedly a good in the tenets of Buddhism, but it left Olgo in close proximity to bloodshed. And he was about to get closer. Hideyoshi's heir was his nephew, Hidetsugu. In the early 1590s, Hidetsugu was tasked with running the country while Hideyoshi fought a war against Korea. This demonstrates that Hideyoshi placed a great deal of trust in his nephew. But around this time, baseless rumors began swirling about Hidetsugu, how he was a sadist who slaughtered innocents. Hideyoshi apparently believed these rumors, and he forced his nephew out of the line of succession and into the monastery at Koyasan. The heir to all of Japan was now Hideyoshi's infant son, Hideyori. Just why Hideyoshi moved against his nephew is one of the most hotly debated questions in Japanese history, and there is no consensus. It may have been as simple as Hideyoshi preferring a natural-born son over a nephew. Some sources claim that Ishida Mitsunari, who would go on to lead the Hideyoshi loyalists at the Battle of Sekigahara, had been whispering the rumors into Hideyoshi's ear. Maybe Hideyoshi's mind was going, or all of the above. Unfortunately for Hidetsugu, his uncle was not satisfied with him simply becoming a priest, and he next ordered Hidetsugu to commit ritual suicide. This put Olgo in an awkward position. Buddhism has strong precepts against shedding blood, and to do so on temple grounds would be even worse. Olgo had to choose between his worldly benefactor and the most strongly held tenets of his faith. In the end, he chose Hideyoshi. In 1595, Hidetsugu knelt upon the ground outside Kongo-Buji Temple and thrust a blade into his stomach. Still unsatisfied, Hideyoshi also ordered the executions of Hidetsugu's entire family, 39 people in total. And as a parting shot, the warlord had his nephew's head put on display and tore down his house. This cruel act would ultimately doom the Hideyoshi clan in two ways. One, Hideyoshi had just trimmed his family tree into a dangerously thin state. And two, one of those Hideyoshi ordered executed was a 15-year-old girl due to become his nephew's concubine. The girl's father, Mogami Yoshiaki, would fight against the Hideyoshi loyalists. He saved Tokugawa Ieyasu from being attacked on two fronts at the decisive Battle of Sekigahara. Olgo's association with Hideyoshi's savagery cost him his reputation, and shortly after Hideyoshi's death in 1598, he was pressured to resign from his post. The monk spent the rest of his life in seclusion, mainly writing poetry, but he could not entirely escape his past. After Ishida Mitsunari was defeated and executed at the Battle of Sekigahara, Hideyoshi's successor, Tokugawa Ieyasu, granted clemency to his enemy's son, on the condition that he join the priesthood. He gave the responsibility of inducting him to Olgo. Olgo died at the age of 73 in 1608, only a few years into the relative peace of Tokugawa rule. He probably would have found it a much better time to travel the country and inspire folks to build great temples. Or maybe he still would have sought out the conflicts that sparked up in that era. It's difficult to break away from what you know.